It is now my great pleasure to introduce Kevin Washburn, Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the U.S. Department of the Interior and an enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma. In addition to carrying out the department's trust responsibilities regarding the management of tribal and individual Indian trust lands and assets, the Assistant Secretary is responsible for promoting the self-determination and economic self-sufficiency of the nation's 566 federally recognized American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and their approximately 2 million enrolled members. A former law school professor and dean, Washburn also previously served as general counsel for the National Indian Gaming Commission and as an assistant United States attorney in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is a well-known scholar of federal Indian law. Among his other books and articles, he is a co-author and editor of the leading legal treatise in the field of Indian law, Cohen's Handbook of Federal Indian Law, the 2012 edition. We are honored today by the presence of the Assistant Secretary Washburn, who will provide introductory remarks. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Kevin Washburn.
Thank you all. It's really wonderful to be here. I want to tell you that I was inspired to be here. I was thrilled to be invited. I was trying to figure out what to talk about, but I read this book. This is the exhibit book, and it's absolutely terrific. It's beautiful, among other things, but it's very thoughtful and inspiring. And the beautiful thing about it is, long after this event exists in our memories, the book will continue to exist. It's full of insightful research and great thoughts from a number of my friends and great scholars, including Matthew Fletcher and Bob Clinton and Susan Schoen Harjo and Phil Deloria. A masterful historical essay by Kevin Gover, who should be known as a great historian, I think, and others. Also, one of my colleagues, Jennifer Nez Denetdell, is featured in the book. And there's great pictures in the book, too. Really a delightful picture of a young Billy Frank Jr., which made my heart smile when I saw that. And also a slightly older Forrest Gerard, and that was really neat as well. Two heroes that we've lost in the past year. So it's just a beautiful book. I want to thank Senator Tester for going first. In a discussion of treaties, a symposium on treaties might not be a welcome place for a federal official. So since you went easy on him, I'm willing to be here. I'm very grateful to him, and he also didn't beat up on me. I guess he realized I had a hard enough time yesterday with Senator McCain over on his committee. So, but he rest assured. Rest assured that he said that he has been hard on the Indian Health Service. He's been hard on the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Bureau of Indian Education as well. He does take his role seriously to give oversight. So, in some eyes, treaties with the federal government might be a touchy subject for someone like me. Treaties, of course, were instruments of manifest destiny. They legitimized the settling of the United States, and they gave it legal cover. Without federal treaties with Indian tribes, there might be no western United States, and the southeastern United States would no doubt look a lot different than it does now. In sum, without treaties, there would be no United States as we know it today. And in some respects, that's a tragedy for Indian tribes. But treaties are symbols of something very positive, too. And in the book, Professor Robert Clinton describes well the central irony in Indian life. For all the evil associated with treaties, treaties are evidence of a very unique relationship and a great source of pride to Indian people, and especially those tribes with treaties, which includes mine, the Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma. These treaties have been broken perhaps more often than they've been kept, of course, but they are an important symbol of a standing in the American polity that's truly unique and a reflection of important legal rights. And in my office, I have more than once had tribes come in and talk to me about their treaty rights when their lawyers and I know good and well they don't even have a treaty. Not all tribes have treaties. Nevertheless, they will talk to me about their treaty rights. And as Clinton notes in the book, indeed, the very words treaty rights have come to mean something much broader than just treaty rights. They've come to mean Indian rights to a great degree. And as Susan Schoen-Harjo and Phil Deloria explained in the book, it's a very complicated history, our relationship with treaties, and to some of us it's a very personal history. In my real life as a law professor, I'm not just a former law professor, I'm a current law professor on leave, and that is the life that I will go back to, so no later than January 20th, 2017. Not that I'm counting the days. I'm not an expert as a law professor on treaties, but it is said that treaties are like constitutions. And just as the Constitution defines the governmental relationship between the United States and each of the states, it's really treaties that define the relationship between the United States and each of the tribes. And indeed, treaties are the supreme law of the land. And like federal constitutional rights are known to have a penumbra. They exude a broader meaning than just the words on the page. Tribal treaties with the United States also have a broader influence. And the penumbra, if you will, in this area, the area of treaties, is known as the trust responsibility. And this penumbra extends even beyond treaties and beyond treaty tribes to all the tribes. And that's perhaps why tribes come to talk about their Indian rights as their treaty rights. If one is tempted to think that treaties are unimportant today, it is their role as the backbone of this relationship, of the trust responsibility, that continues their importance. That's one of their continuing reasons for being. And one only need to read the essays in this book, on the essays on treaty fishing rights, for example, to see the importance of treaties in relatively modern times for protecting Indian rights. And that's a really inspirational story. I do a lot of thinking about treaties in my current job, not just about Indian treaties, though. So in February, I was at the United Nations in Geneva testifying on behalf of the United States in a treaty defense. And so the United States has international treaties, of course, and we go, the State Department usually sends a delegation to defend the United States on its performance of treaties. And one of these are usually multilateral treaties that we have with UN-type treaties that many countries are signatories to. And in February, the U.S. was being evaluated by the UN Human Rights Committee on its compliance with the UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And the panel asked me to attend, the delegation asked me to attend, and so I attended and I fielded some of the questions. You can imagine what this is like. There's a big panel of experts from around the world that are critically questioning the United States delegation, and there's a delegation of 10 to 12 American officials who kind of have to take the beating in some respects. And the panel asked questions on the death penalty in Guantanamo and homelessness and all sorts of Indian issues in addition, but so there's a wide range of federal government officials there. And one of the committee members started sort of pressing me on, why doesn't the United States just apologize to the tribes and sort of be done with it? And that was sort of the attitude of the question. Those weren't the exact words. And I said, we will never be done with it. As long as the United States occupies North America, we will always have obligations to the Indian tribes. Well, yeah, And the general that was representing the Department of Defense, when I said that the United States is occupying North America, he perked up. Suddenly I had his attention. He'd sort of been glazed over until that point, and so he was alarmed to think that we were merely occupying North America. But at any rate, it's quite enjoyable to kind of see our perspective of the international stage. I've got a lot of problems with treaties, a lot of complaints, and the treaties are of course imperfect, not just because they took away a lot of land as they were reserving other land, but I've got some tremendous practical frustrations with them today. And one of them is that they came with excellent descriptions of land. They described the land that was going to be retained in very great detail, and that's good. It's good to have clear legal descriptions of lands by metes and bounds. But treaties also retained water rights for tribes. The water rights weren't so well described. And so Land is exceedingly important, but water rights are exceedingly important. And tribes have significant rights to water that is really unquantified and to some degree unknown. And it's an extremely important resource and an extremely valuable resource. And that clarity that we have for land is utterly lacking in the area of water. And that's a real problem because since Indian water rights aren't clearly defined nationwide, other people are using those water rights, and they're using them without compensating tribes for those water rights. And as a trustee, it weighs heavily on my soul, that fact, and we have to work on that. We have to do better. We have to quantify those water rights and get Indian tribe settlements. And so we have continued to work on that sort of thing so we can ensure that tribes are getting value when their rights are being used. Treaties were precursors to a relationship that today has come to be filled with much more mundane agreements, ordinary 638 contracts. For many of you know what that means, but for those of you who don't, each year, to meet the federal trust responsibility to Indian tribes, we actually sign contracts with Indian tribes to provide those services to Indian people because they do, frankly, a better job at providing services to their own people than federal officials ever can. And we sign thousands of those contracts each year. The BIA signs thousands of those contracts each year. And those agreements, again, are sort of the progeny of treaties in some respects. And we've broken these agreements too. And so for many years, we've not paid tribes the full amount of money that they've contracted for on those under those 638 contracts and self-governance compacts. These costs, known as contract support costs, have not been fully paid, and we have to start meeting those obligations and those promises as well. And so that's one of the ways we are trying to mend our ways and to begin to abide by those agreements, which, after all, are the modern progeny of treaties. The relationship between tribes is both mundane in some respects, 638 contracts, for example, and complex. And buried in Kevin Gover's historical essay towards the end of this great book is a discussion about the Indian Reorganization Act. And there's a great gem in there about that law. And through that law, though it's 80 years old, my office has the power to remedy some of the faults of the treaty era. And I thank John Collier and Felix Cohen every day, and there's a really neat picture of John Collier in the book, for those powers, because they were the ones who helped to mastermind that and get those powers passed through Congress. And indeed, the most gratifying part of my job is using one of these powers to issue reservation proclamations. So my office has the power to establish new reservations or expand existing reservations. And I can't tell you how happy that makes me. It's a lot simpler now than going to get a treaty. It's in a stroke of a pen, with a lot of research in advance and some work with the tribe, we can create a reservation or expand a reservation. And we've done it 4 times this year alone. And again, that's one of the most gratifying parts of my job. A close second is taking land into trust for tribes, so restoring homelands in that way. In the last 5.5 years, the department has taken roughly 264,000 acres of land into trust for Indian tribes across the country. Of course, this is a drop in the bucket of all the land that was lost, more than 100 million acres. But it's something, and it's we are learning and we are expanding Indian country through this work. Today, we work hard to live up to the trust responsibility that the treaties help to establish. How does the federal government determine how it will meet its trust responsibility today? Well, in any given year, it usually involves budgets. It involves developing budgets so that we can run tribal programs. And I won't be with you all day today because I have several other meetings. But one of the most important meetings I have today is actually meeting across town at the White House on budgets. And I can tell you, as a law professor, I don't always enjoy bureaucratic meetings about the budgets. One reason someone becomes a law professor is so other people will have to think about budgets. But we have a new process that's been established. In the summer of 2013, President Barack Obama, through an executive order, established the White House Native American Affairs Council. And this council is really important. One of its purposes is to break down silos between federal agencies. One of the wonderful developments of the past 20 or 30 years or so is that nearly every major federal cabinet agency has an office that has Indian programs. And some of those are quite extensive. There's some really large offices. But what's happened is we've become all silos unto ourselves for Indian tribes, different silos. And so one of the purposes of the council, the President's Council, is to ensure that we are talking to one another across the federal government. Another purpose is to ensure that we're serving tribes not just with our Indian programs, but with our general programs. And so today, after the establishment of this White House Native American Affairs Council, my boss, Secretary Sally Jewell of the Secretary of the Interior, who chairs this council, she said, look, we need to be coordinating our budgets. We need to be meeting to talk about how we're serving tribes around our budgets. And so today, for the first time, about 6 or 7 different cabinet agencies are going to get together with OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, something that most of you don't know exists and don't need to know exists. It's not very interesting, but we're going to get together and we're going to present our Indian budgets to one another, so at least we know what our sister agencies are doing. And it's terrific that so many agencies are engaged in Indian programs, but we have to be talking to one another. And just to give you a sense of this, in Interior, the budget, the annual budget for Indian programs overall is around $3 billion. And Indian Health Service is about $4.5 billion. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has about $650 million a year that they give out. And DOJ, Department of Justice, has more than $300 million. So there's a lot of money here. There's in excess of $10 million. And it adds up to real money eventually, but we have to be coordinated in how we do this. We can't be living in a bunch of separate stovepipes. So this afternoon, Secretary Jewell said, there has to be a better way to run a railroad. And so this afternoon, we're going to get together, again, a historic meeting, the first time ever, to actually share among federal agencies about what we're doing with our budgets and try to break down those stovepipes. So this is a modest first step, but an important and historic one. And another goal of the council that I mentioned is to influence agency policy decisions. And so another thing that's really important that we really want to communicate to the other agencies is you have Indian programs, but some of your general programs have obstacles so that Indian tribes cannot participate in those. So for example, they might allow state and local governments to participate, but not tribes, or they might allow nonprofits to participate in these programs, but not tribes. And so we are anxious to have a very broad discussion about how we can make more of our general programs available to tribes. So, while you all will be here engaging in a very lively discussion, a very interesting symposium, intellectual thought going on, I will be leading a group of PAS officials from 6 different cabinet agencies at the White House, and we will be poring over spreadsheets with lots of numbers on them. So you will be having the more interesting discussion, and I will, in some ways, I would certainly rather be here, but I vow to you that I will be working hard to ensure that the discussion of the White House, if not interesting, is important and fruitful. And so this is an opportunity for me to try to make a difference for Indian country and to try to help us do much better in meeting some of the very high aspirations that you see in some of the treaties that you will be talking about today. And I wish you a very, very good day. And I will tell you, I will be looking longingly back in this direction and wishing that I were here. But I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to encourage you to get this book and soak it up. It's absolutely terrific. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to be part of this historic event. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thank you, Assistant Secretary and Professor Washburn. Our next speaker is the distinguished Robert Clinton, Foundation Professor of Law at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University, and an affiliated faculty member of the ASU American Indian Studies program. He is also a faculty fellow at the Center for Law, Science, and Innovation. Clinton has served on the courts of several tribes in addition to teaching and writing about tribal law, American Indian history, federal courts, cyberspace law, copyright, and civil procedure. His publications include numerous articles on federal Indian law and policy, constitutional law, and federal jurisdiction. Professor Clinton, welcome.